another huge event this Sunday, and potentially a bigger event for the underdogs here is Galway versus Dublin in the league final on Sunday. Like we were chatting about this with Michael Meehan earlier in the week, and I think there is just a general sense of quiet confidence about this Galway team that is a little bit different to your Derrys or your Roscommons of yesteryear in the league final, where they get to the promised land. And I know that's using the promised land very lightly there in terms of a league final, but that Galway kind of see this as a stepping stone rather than a huge day out in Croke Park like, say, Roscommon and Derry might have done a couple of years ago.
It just depends on how it goes. It's a stepping stone if you win. Clearly, it's a massive feather in your cap, and you've beaten the All-Ireland champions and everybody's favourite for this year's All-Ireland, and it's clearly another major step down the road to the progress Galway need to make to be a semi-final team or an All-Ireland final team. But if you lose heavily, if you lose by 10, 15, 20 points on Sunday, we saw what happened Derry in 2014, where they were probably the best team in the league until the final. And Mark Lynch was one of the best players. And they haven't
recovered since.
Well, they're in Division 4. They have since been demoted 3 times in 3 seasons, and they have not done anything in the championship in that time. Now, I'm not saying it was all down to that league final. Clearly, things in Derry are not in a great place. Infrastructure-wise, playing personnel-wise, management-wise, they've got an awful lot to do. But if Galway were to win the game or lose by a couple of points or are competitive for an hour, well, yeah, it is another big step for them. And they're certainly not going to be easy to beat, because they've shown in the league going through it unbeaten how difficult they are to beat. They haven't produced big scores, but they've conceded fewer scores than any other side in Division 1. And Dublin have shown 1 or 2 chinks, particularly in that game at Pearse Stadium, where they kind of had to score a couple of late scores to force a draw, albeit it was Galway that got the late equaliser. I just think Dublin have left an awful lot in the tank.
Part of me definitely agrees with you on some of that. The other element, though, with Galway is, I think, certainly just from watching them this year, and I think it's just because they're in Division 1, is naturally with the league, it actually tells us a lot about the team, a lot more than the Championship does, because we get to see them week in, week out. And because they've been in Division 1, we've got to see a huge sample size of what this Galway team is all about. And I think there's an element of surprise about how Galway have approached matches in terms of, I guess, getting stuck into a team, the Paddy Tally effect. But that's not new. That hasn't been a 2018 phenomenon. I think it's just been going on in Division 2, and we haven't seen it regularly. We've only seen their championship occurrences, and everybody remembers kind of getting caught by the bright lights of Croke Park in an All-Ireland quarter-final last year. So this has been a hard edge that Galway have been working on for some time. They bring in Paddy Tally, and it's now a more refined hard edge. They're a little bit more street smart this year and more experienced, which is key.
Yeah, they're a big team. They're very physical. They've got the Currafin boys coming back in now, and they're just winners, and they know exactly how to get it done on the big days in Croke Park. The caveat would be, we saw how they imploded against Roscommon in the Connacht final. We saw how they pretty much allowed Kerry just to canter into an All-Ireland semi-final last year, which I just thought was so disappointing at the time, because I expected really big things from Galway, because I was doing the commentary for Sky on the round 4 qualifier win over Donegal that they absolutely dismantled in Markievicz Park with a brilliant display of attacking football. None of that was on display against Kerry, and it was just such a letdown. And maybe they have refined that a little bit, so when it does come to the really big games, we'll see on Sunday, because I think it's a massive game for Galway to go to Croke Park and win, which is something, yes, they did last year when they beat Kildare in the Division 2 final, but I mean, that was one of the worst games we've seen in Croke Park in a long, long time.
Yeah.
They have to keep winning in order for the players to continue to buy into the Kevin Walsh blueprint, because I think guys like Sean Armstrong, for example, Damien Comer, I'm not sure they're really enjoying playing the way that Galway are playing, because it's not a forwards game.
But they're winning.
Exactly. That has to keep happening. They have to keep winning. Sooner or later, players will only accept the results as long as A, they're in the team, and B, it's seen as a means to an end. But if you start losing games, you'll really start to question, well, why are we keeping 12, 13 men behind the ball? Why am I expected to track a man from one end of the pitch to the other when we're actually not getting anything at the other end for it?
But ultimately, it's only going to change when it's too late. Like, they're not going to change the 13 men behind the ball until they get shown up.
No, they won't. Well, even if they get shown up this Sunday, I don't see it changing. And you have to, the league as well, how much can you actually read into the league? Look at the teams that have been playing in Division 1. The wins over Kildare, Donegal, they won 1 match between them, and that was against Kildare in Donegal's case. Mayo way off where they need to be in the league. Kerry are in a serious period of transition. They've got so many young guys coming through. So the only big scalp I would give them in that run of games would be the draw with Dublin and the win over Tyrone.
I disagree with you on certain points of that, and that is to do with the league final and how big a game this is. And okay, you're going to have a go at me for this, but with regards to last year's league final, you know how happy I was as a Kerry supporter to get that. You saw
embarrassingly so, yeah.
You saw, well, you say embarrassingly so, but look at the way Dublin celebrated the 2013 league final. They celebrated that just like Kerry did last year as well. This was a big thing for them, because when was the last time Dublin won a league before 2013? Did they win in 2012? I don't think they did.
No, they won 2013, 14, 15 and 16.
Yeah, but before 2013 felt like a watershed moment for that Dublin team, where they had started to do it earlier in the year, that, you know, forget this crap about peaking at the right time. This is going to be a great team.
The 2011 league final, there was the watershed because they threw the league final away against Cork.
Yeah.
Absolutely threw it away. I think were they leading by 10 points and they lost the game.
I remember that.
And that, in the eyes of a lot of people, made that Dublin team.
Sure, but my point is that it doesn't actually. Okay, it does clearly matter what happened to Kerry after that league final last year, but that league final wasn't a means to an end with regards to 2017 as a single season. I think that was an idea of finally we've beaten Dublin in Croke Park, because Dublin did care about that game. It was a good Dublin team, and if you talk about the players that Dublin were missing, Kerry were missing them as well. So when it comes to this Sunday, and if Galway managed to beat Dublin, people will rightfully say that, well, sure, look, that's not going to have any bearing on Championship. Dublin will still probably beat them in the Championship. But for the sake of beating Dublin in Croke Park, I think this would be huge for Galway to beat them on Sunday.
Why did I say it wouldn't?
Well, I think in terms of the general sense, you're pointing to the future, that, you know, this is one game, and should they meet each other maybe in a couple of years' time, that this game will have no bearing. But even when it comes to this summer, I
don't think this will have any bearing on a future Dublin-Galway meeting, because I think Dublin are way beyond where Galway are at the moment. But if Galway win, I think it has a major bearing on Galway against all their other opponents over the course of this year's championship. I think it gives them a massive boost going into the Mayo game. It gives them a huge fill of self-belief when it comes to their next big game in Croke Park. I don't think you can underestimate that.
That's a key point.
Namely a Super 8. When they go to Croke Park to play either against Dublin or another team in the All-Ireland quarter-finals. So yeah, I think for Galway it's a massive game. I think it's a bigger game for Galway than it is Dublin, personally. Yeah, we can see up on screen Stephen Cluxton, and we can see a selection of celebratory photos of Dublin players celebrating in 2013. So we're going to do this, Dave. This is Tommy's idea out in the box to compare and contrast 2013 and 2017. We can roll through the images here of Dublin players. That could be just after a score that Bernard Brogan's kicked, and Darren Daly was just particularly pleased with it. That proves my point even more. You know, here we are. Look at that. Joyous celebrations. It looks like they've won an All-Ireland, but look, the upper tier is empty. It must be a league final. There's Mick Bohan there as well. That was also the first major trophy they'd won under Jim Gavin as well. So it was year one after Pat Gilroy. They'd lost their All-Ireland crown the previous year to Mayo in the All-Ireland semi-final. That was a big day for Dublin, yeah. And then this is Kerry last year. As I say, I will not hide the fact that Kerry were absolutely chuffed with that last year. It is a huge moment to beat Dublin in Croke Park in whatever it is, April, because it's different to beating them on the first day of the league at the end of January or the start of February. It is a progressed team. Because of the strength and depth Dublin have, they will always put out an exceptionally good team, and because of the man Jim Gavin is, they will always prepare as well as they can. Okay, I'll give you that. That is probably the most happy. You can see Darren O'Sullivan absolutely, gritted teeth there. That is a very important win. You can see it in his face, and I still maintain that the legacy of that is an important win. And look at Dublin as well. That proves my point right there, Dave. If Galway beat Dublin on Sunday, it will have an impact of legacy on this Galway team. That again, we've no proof that photo was taken from the league final of 2017. Tommy, our production team, could have lifted that from anywhere. Are you accusing them of, skewing our opinion and trying to force you into a corner here where you have to agree with my point? Is that what you're accusing us of? All I'm saying is that there's no proof that was taken actually last April. No, look, I agree with your point on that. If Galway win it, it's a huge moment for them. If Dublin don't win the game, I don't think they're going to lose any sleep, just like they didn't against having lost to Kerry. They knew that the bigger days were still to come. But for Galway's state of development and their belief in Kevin Walsh, their belief in the system, but it just will be very interesting to see how the league blueprint transcribes or transfers to Croke Park on what we hope will be a half-decent surface, a half-decent day weather-wise, big pitch, big stadium, big crowd, as opposed to playing on the kind of heavy laden pitches and against teams that maybe aren't as far down the line in terms of their strength and conditioning that Galway might be.
What date is that, Dave? Call me out the date there, call me out the year. Is that April 2017, I see?
That was on our audio stream. It does say, I never doubt it, Tommy. I'm just...
9th to the 4th, 2017 to all our listeners out there is what it says on the date.
Do you think Galway can win the game? Real question.
I think they can. I don't think they will. More pressing, and I'm not sure that we have time for this, but I would actually be very curious to get your best Dublin 15 with everybody fit at the moment, given the new players that have come in the league. If we rattle through it quickly, I'd say we have a few minutes to do this. So McCaffrey's back, Keane O'Sullivan's back, Cluxton is fully fit, Diarmuid Connolly is back. Like, what's your best Dublin 15?
Wow, right. Well, obviously you're going to go with Stephen Cluxton in goal. You would probably have to have it would be the usual 15 that you would expect. You'll have Philly McMahon, Mick Fitzsimons, Johnny Cooper as your full back line. You'll have James McCarthy, Jack McCaffrey, Cian O'Sullivan and John Small. 3 of those 4, depending who's available and fit.
Wait, so everybody's fit. What's your
I would I'll move McCarthy into midfield, so I'll have John Small, Jack McCaffrey and Cian O'Sullivan as this half back line. I will have James McCarthy alongside Brian Fenton in midfield, which means that Michael Dermot is going to have to start on the bench. Okay. If he's fit and available and playing well, Diarmuid Connolly starts for me every day of the week.
He is fit.
Right.
And everybody's on a level form.
Okay, Kieran Kilkenny's going to be in the team as well. The other half-forward position is one of interest.
Yeah.
If everybody's fit and playing well, you would probably maybe put Paddy Andrews in that position.
Andrews, a wing forward.
There's a good chance he's going to start the game.
Tommy's saying Brian Howard into my ear.
If everybody's playing well and fit, Brian Howard doesn't get into the team just yet for me. But he's a brilliant guy to be able to bring off the bench. I think Brian Howard could be the Cormac Costello, for example, of this year. Tommy's telling me that Brian Howard replaces Paul Flynn, but I don't have Paul Flynn in the team either right now. I would have a Paddy Andrews in the team because I love watching him play. And then this is all interchangeable with the 3 guys who are inside. Right now it's going to be Dean Rock, Con O'Callaghan, we've forgotten about because he doesn't play football until June. And the last attacking berth is up for grabs with the likes of Colin Basquel, with the likes of Kevin McManaman.
Paul Mannion is starting for Dublin this year. He has a shirt banked. He's been...
I would probably would say that Paul Mannion would definitely start the game. And that'll be your 6. So it makes it very difficult for a Basquel or Brian Howard and some of the older heads like McManaman or an Eoin O'Gara. A Paddy Andrews if you don't go with him to get back into the team. But we're just listing 9-10 forwards that we'd be perfectly happy to see. Paul Flynn, if he's back, if he's fit, is always going to be an option. And it just, Cormac Costello, who had a little bit of a spell in the league as well, it kind of underlines exactly where Dublin are. But all those guys aren't going to be around.
No, they aren't, but at the same time...
Question marks over a lot of the fellas we've just mentioned.
If they are around, this is your team. Cluxton in goals, Philly, Fitzsimons, Johnny Cooper is your full back line, John Small, Cian O'Sullivan, Jack McCaffrey is your half back line, James McCarthy and Brian Fenton your midfield. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with you to this point. Kieran Kilkenny, Diarmuid Connolly, don't think anybody's going to disagree with you there. Paddy Andrews at wing forward maybe is the one sticking point. Probably deserves his place there in terms of big game experience.
Or you just switch him and Conor Callaghan and you have O'Callaghan into the half forward line where he started the All-Ireland semis and football finals. You move Paddy Andrews into the corner.
Yeah.
And much difference does that make? Not an awful lot. It's interchangeable.
That's it. Dean Rock and Paul Mannion, the other 2 players that you've gone for. I kind of pushed you into the Paul Mannion situation there a small bit.
Well, I keep having to remind myself that you're saying provided everybody's fit and available. But right now I have Paul Mannion's hamstring injury in my mind, and it looked pretty bad on the day. Now he will be back, obviously, but he just needs to get himself back flying and back to full fitness. But when you look at that 15 and the guys that aren't able to make it into the team, it is just so difficult to see who's going to beat them.
It proves the point that if Dublin stay fit and avoid any moments of madness that would lead to any extended suspensions, they're unstoppable this year.
Well,
that team, I don't think
they were pretty lucky with injury last year and suspension, bar the Diarmuid Connolly one.
But they
only won the All-Ireland by a point.
True, fair point. They always have been, though. So on the point of fitness, I don't think it's luck anymore. I think it's just very, very good strength and conditioning, timing their run perfectly. That being said, this is a new year, this is a new structure. They will play tougher games this year than they will have ever played under the Jim Gavin era before they get to the semi-final stage. So that changes
why will
things.
They?
You would imagine the Super 8 is going to throw up, every single game of the Super 8 is going to be more difficult than any game they'll play in Leinster.
I think the proof of that will be in the pudding, because the problem as regards Dublin and the Super 8s for me is going to be when and where they play their 3 games. I think Dublin need to be on the road. The GAA need to fix it so that Dublin are on the road in their first game. So you might end up in St Tiernach's Park, for example, in game 1. That's the only game they could potentially lose for me.
Yeah.
And if they lose their opening game, well, then that means there's no room for manoeuvre. They have to win their home game at Croke Park and then their actual Croke Park game. That could be against a Mayo if they don't go through the front door, for example, and maybe a Division 2 side, a Clare or somebody. But I think that Dublin are going to, the depth they have in their squad is actually going to be even further emphasised when it comes to the Super 8s.
Dublin could have Mayo in their Super 8 group. I think that's a distinct possibility. If Galway beat Mayo on May 13, then
opens that door,
Mayo will suddenly be kind of skewed out of it to the point where, so for anybody who hasn't followed the kind of potential outcomes of the Super 8, I'm very excited for the Super 8. So I've looked at this probably last year at this point, but it's looking like it's going to be Connacht and Munster winners in the same Super 8 group, the Ulster and Leinster winners in the same Super 8 group. So that means you'll have the Ulster and Leinster runners-up, provided they don't lose their round 4 qualifier, in with the Munster and Connacht winners, and vice versa when it comes to the Connacht and Munster runners-up. So if Mayo lose to Galway on May 13, that completely skews this kind of favourites tag that you would have of Mayo and Kerry being in the same Super 8s group, and Mayo could shift over and be in Dublin's Super 8s group.
They could be in a group at Dublin, Tyrone and Mayo in the same group, which would just be spectacular.
One of those games.
And then you could easily have another Division 1 side in there as well.
Just in terms of that potential trio, because there is this notion that you need more than 2 big teams in the group to actually get a brilliant, high-profile game in a provincial ground. But that won't happen. What will happen there is that Croke Park will say, right, Dublin's home game will be against Tyrone, Dublin's Croke Park game will be against Mayo, and that way you get those 2 huge games in Croke Park. So that will mean Mayo's away game is played to Dublin in Croke Park, and Mayo's Croke Park game will be against Tyrone. So that way we'll get all these great games concentrated in Croke Park.
Which is not what you want.
It's not what you want, but that's probably what's going to happen.
What you want is Dublin going to Castlebar on opening night.
The only way that'll happen is if Kerry lose in the Munster Championship and Kerry are thrown into that side of the group as well, and you've got an unbelievable Super 8 group. It could also happen if you get Kerry, Tyrone, Mayo on the other side of the draw as well, because you wouldn't have the home caveat with Dublin. But we're getting very much into the nuts and bolts of the Super 8s.
The strength and depth in Dublin's squad will mean that they will always emerge from the Super 8 probably unscathed, and with their confidence even further enhanced. But so I don't think that just because the structure has changed that there's actually going to be stiffer tests for Dublin. Look, now, it may prove to be that way, but I would doubt it right now. But I'm not even sure how we got into naming Dublin starting 15. But the fact is, if they play well on Sunday and they utilise the spaces of Croke Park against the mass defence, as they did against Tyrone in last year's All-Ireland semi-final, they'll probably win the game pulling up.
I was just interested in your take, considering your favourite team is Dublin. Now, your favourite team, Cavan, is playing Roscommon this weekend. It's a 2 o'clock throw-in on Sunday as well in Croke Park. Cavan versus Roscommon. As you mentioned at the start, it's great to see these teams coming back up. Is there kind of an element of their emerging a bubble, a number of yo-yo teams that'll keep going up and down between 1 and 2, and that this emergence of a Clare and a Tipperary will always be prevented?
I don't think so. Tipperary should have beaten Cavan by all accounts, just because of the fact they got themselves into position to do so going to the last couple of minutes. It was interesting. I was in Ballybuffet for Off the Ball on Sunday afternoon, and the full-time whistle in the Donegal-Mayo game went a couple of minutes before the whistle in Breffni Park, and I had to get out of the press box to get downstairs to try and get some reaction from Stephen Rochford and from Declan Bonner, and Tipperary had just gone in front as I was leaving the press box, so I had assumed that Tip had beaten Cavan and that Cavan had somehow managed to throw away this brilliant opportunity for promotion where they just needed to win one of the last 2 games against Roscommon and Tipperary, and they were up, and they butchered that opportunity by losing both. So I went back downstairs to speak the 2 managers in foul humour, and one of my final questions to Declan Bonner was, you will not find the Cavan match coming up too quickly at all. Like it's going to be on you before you realise it, so you have to kind of get over the disappointment of relegation. And he says, yeah, and made even worse, of course, by the fact that Cavan will be flying after what happened this afternoon. I was like, sorry, what was that?
The party hat straight out.
Exactly. But no, I think Division 2 has been ultra competitive this year, and that's with a lot of improvement still left in the likes of Tipperary and Cork, for example. I think Armagh are going to be a really tough nut to crack in Division 2 next year as well. They're all possible teams that could be looking at promotion next season. So I think it's just coincident that Roscommon and Cavan have got their house in order and they have been able to get back up a season after going down. Now, how that manifests itself in the championship remains to be seen, because it's such a difficult job for Cavan to have to go to Ballybuffet in an Ulster Championship preliminary round, a place I can't ever recall them winning. I don't think they've won there in my lifetime. I do remember being there in '92. It was a replay from the opening round of the Ulster Championship in dreadful conditions. Cavan should have beaten Donegal. A lot of people forget that, to prevent the All-Ireland. In the Dublin, or Donegal had to get a late score to force a replay in Ballybuffet, and Cavan were cleaned in Ballybuffet that afternoon. I still haven't really forgiven my father for dragging me to that game. So it's very difficult to see Cavan going to Ballybuffet and winning, but beating Tipperary in the way that they did, digging out the scores, and if they could beat Roscommon at Croke Park on Sunday, that would just be the perfect fill up, the brilliant momentum that they would be bringing into that game. And Roscommon as well, backing up a provincial championship victory and more than rattling the cage of Mayo in an All-Ireland quarter-final by coming straight back up the following year. It's tantamount a testament to the work that Kevin McStay and Liam McHale have done down there to be able to show that last year was not a one-off, that they're going to go now into a third season, 2019, playing Division 1 football. And the draw in Connacht has gone Roscommon's way. There's a very good chance they're going to be playing in a Connacht final again this year. So they're another side that are really making progress. And I really hope it's a good game between the two of them, because they don't tend to be when Cavan and Roscommon
It's a phony
meet.
war though, isn't it? The Division 2, 3 and 4 league finals, really, because the promotion has been secured. That's the job done.
It's winning a national title in Croke Park.
True.
But in with all due respect to those counties, when are Carlow going to be playing in what is essentially an All-Ireland final at that level again? So if Carlow were to win in Croke Park, that'll be a memory those players will take with them for an awful long time, whereas a lot of the Laois players might have experience of winning a game at Croke Park against one of the lesser lights in Leinster Championship football.
Yeah, just to go through the fixtures this weekend, starting with tomorrow's games and the Division 2 round 6 games, which has a bit of a bearing on relegation. It's Down versus Tipperary at 3 o'clock, and at the same time it is Louth versus Meath. Meath just need to better Down's results against Tipperary and they will survive in Division 2. A big story that would be if Meath were to go down to Division 3. But in Division 3, the final, as you mentioned, in Croke Park, it is Armagh versus Fermanagh. It's a 5 o'clock throw-in, preceded by Carlow versus Laois at 3 p.m. That's the Division 4 decider. I will come back to the hurling in just a moment, but then just to mention that Dublin-Galway is at 4 o'clock throw-in at Croke Park on Sunday in the Division 2, as we've just been talking about. Cavan versus Roscommon is a 2 o'clock throw-in on Sunday at the same venue. But
how messy it is that you have a Division 2 games taking place on the same weekend as the Division 2 league final. And this is an organisation which a strand of it refused to double up with the FBD insurance final earlier in the year. When was it Roscommon were playing Galway, was it?
Yeah.
And they were due to meet in the final, but they were also meeting in the final round of group games in that competition. And to uphold the integrity of the FBD Insurance League, there was a refusal from the Connacht County Board, the Connacht Provincial Council, to allow the two games just to be played as one. We'll play the last group game and the final as one, winner takes all, because you had to uphold the integrity of that competition. Yet here we are with the league, a far greater and hugely more important competition than those Mickey Mouse tournaments at the start of the season, and they were willing to cast aside any number of games, as is the case in Division 3 and Division 4 in particular, which will not be played. It's just smacks of double standards and very short-termism in the way that the GAA are thinking about these games. I don't understand it. And you're the Waterford manager, for example. McGlinchey was really upset this week, and rightly so. You've only got a certain number of games to prepare your team for the championship, and one of them has been taken off you.
Yeah, it is ridiculous, and Mickey Mouse is the right way to describe his competitions. The problem here isn't the club-only month of April. Of course, it constitutes a bit of a problem when it comes to compressing fixtures in, but you can decompress those fixtures by getting rid of those stupid competitions back in January. The way the league is it is still a warm-up competition, despite the fact that it is the best competition in Gaelic games at the moment. Play the start of it in the middle of January, early January. Screw it. It is the best competition, but it is still a warm-up for the summer. Decompress it in that way rather than eating into your club-only month of April.
And what have you done to the integrity of the league by binning a number of the final round fixtures? It's a really bad road to be going down from the GAA's point of view.
Definitely.
But if you've got your Connacht Council that are unwilling to double up on a game in a Mickey Mouse tournament at the start of the season, and now 3 months later you've got the GAA happy enough to just cancel games, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, we'll just briefly touch on hurling, the hurling semi-finals this weekend. It is Tipperary versus Limerick at Semple at 7 o'clock tomorrow evening, while the other semi is Wexford versus Kilkenny at Innovate Wexford Park. That is a 2 p.m. throw-in on Sunday afternoon. It's just a fantastic weekend of GAA action, and the hurling semi-finals are probably going to get put in the shadow of the football to a certain extent because of all the other sport that's going on as well. But they're two cracking games, and Davy versus Cody is going to be one of the storylines of the year when they meet again in the championship. This is already their third meeting this year. It's incredible, and they're both sides that come with such an intrigue at the moment, because I think there is merit in the point that Kilkenny are being written off a little bit too early this season, and Wexford, well, they don't need any hyping up whatsoever at the moment. This
is a championship game in everything but name.
Yeah.
Wexford Park will be pretty much full this weekend. Is there a better place to be when Wexford are rolling under David Fitzgerald than Wexford Park in a big game? And the thing and I guarantee you this is a point that will be hammered home with David Fitzgerald all week. You do not give Kilkenny an opportunity to come back at you. Right now, Wexford have the upper hand on them. They have their foot in their throat. They've beaten them the last 2 times they've met in big games. And David Fitzgerald will be thinking, now is not the time to allow Kilkenny to start believing in themselves again, because you're going to have to face them in the round robin of the league structure in the Leinster Championship. So make sure you plant even more doubt in the minds of Kilkenny when it comes to playing Wexford by beating them, and beating them well this weekend. Plus, Wexford need to win something under David Fitzgerald, and to win a league title, their first national title since winning the All-Ireland 22 years ago, would be an unbelievable achievement, and it would give them so much momentum going into the championship.
Akin to Galway in the football, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It would just copper fasten the ideas that David Fitzgerald trying to implement down there. Now, I don't think the players are in any way needing to have any further evidence put in front of them as to what Davy is doing with them is the right way to go. The other semi-final isn't quite as intriguing, but it's only because Kilkenny Wexford is just so appetising. But if Limerick beat Tipperary and are suddenly in a league final, like a Limerick-Wexford league final, what an attractive game that would be, and unbelievably
great for hurling.
Brilliant for hurling. You really desperately want the Limerick Renaissance to be the real thing, because they bring so much to a championship. Very similar to Wexford in a lot of ways. The sheer amount of colour, the support, Limerick supporters, they're like Roscommon, Mayo, Cavan, Wexford fans. Like, they need very little to get their teeth into, to hop on some kind of a wagon that's rolling out of town, because they absolutely love when their inter-county side is going well. And they've got some really good hurlers. They're going to have all the Napiershig boys back very soon, just ploughing into that squad, just as Dublin will have with Coola, Galway with Kerry. It makes such a big difference, particularly when you're going well, to have your ranks swelled again, further competition for places. And they will lay down a real marker if they beat Tipperary, a Tipperary team that has kind of just played around with its starting 15 throughout the league. They have treated the league not with contempt, but as a means to an end. And it's worrying that here they are in a league semi-final, and they're now starting to turn the screw and look like they're a side that's going places again. That 2/3 of the game against Dublin that they displayed last weekend was quite brilliant.